The observation deck of the Galactic Council station stretched across 5 kilometers of transparent alloy, offering a view of Axios Prime that had inspired poets from 100 worlds. But Commander Sarah Chen wasn't looking at the planet below. Her eyes were fixed on the sleek vessels of the Council fleet, ships that moved like living things through the void, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that bent light itself. The TCSV Indomitable hung at the edge of the formation like a scarred bulldog among greyhounds. 600 years old, built in the shipyards of Mars during humanity's first desperate push into deep space, she wore her age in every rivet and weld. Her armor was honest steel and ceramic composite, thick enough to see with the naked eye. Her weapons pods bristled with railguns and missile tubes, technology that made the Council representatives laugh behind their hands. Chen had seen the recordings. The Zexari ambassador, a being of living crystal whose thoughts moved at quantum speeds, had actually giggled when the human delegation request came through. The sound files were distributed across the Council networks within hours, becoming something of a joke. The humans want membership, the posts read. They still use kinetic weapons. They still burn chemicals to move through space. The delegation chamber was worse. Chen stood at attention behind Ambassador Williams, watching as humanity's case for Council membership was presented to beings who considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic civilization. The Zexari sat in their section, light refracting through their bodies in patterns that hurt human eyes. The Mothcon floated in their containment fields, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form 3,000 years ago. The Karathi occupied the largest section, their bioengineered bodies perfect in every way, having eliminated disease, aging, and inefficiency from their genetics. Ambassador Williams spoke well. He talked about Earth's contributions to galactic culture, humanity's colonies on 47 worlds, their research in xenobiology and linguistics. He carefully avoided mentioning military capabilities, knowing it was a losing argument before it began. The Zexari representative, whose name translated roughly as harmonious calculation of the 7th degree, cut him off mid-sentence. Ambassador Williams, we have reviewed your petition. We have also reviewed your civilization's technological assessment. I will be direct as your species appreciates directness. You are denied. The words hung in the chamber. Williams kept his composure, but Chen saw his jaw tighten. May I ask the reasoning? Your technology is insufficient. By our standards, you are at least 3 paradigm shifts behind the minimum requirements for Council membership. You still use projectile weapons, physical armor, chemical propulsion for your smaller craft. Your computers are still partially electronic rather than quantum. Your medical science still requires physical intervention rather than genetic pre-correction. The Zexari paused, and if a being of living crystal could sound condescending, it managed perfectly. You are, in the most respectful terms possible, primitive. A Mothkin representative shimmered into visibility. Its voice came from everywhere at once, a side effect of beings who existed partially outside normal space. We do not mean offense, Ambassador. Many species go through this phase. You will evolve. In perhaps another 1,000 years, you may reapply. We suggest focusing on moving beyond kinetic force as a problem-solving methodology. The Karathi delegate said nothing, but its expression of polite disgust said everything necessary. The meeting ended shortly after. Chen followed Williams back to the shuttle, neither speaking until they were alone in the small craft heading back to the Indomitable. Well, Williams said, breaking the silence, that went exactly as predicted. They actually used the word primitive to our faces. Better than behind our backs, I suppose. Williams loosened his collar, suddenly looking very old. Command knew this would happen. They wanted it on record, wanted the Council to deny us so that when Earth makes its next move, no one can say we didn't try diplomacy. Chen frowned. What next move? Before Williams could answer, every screen in the shuttle flared red. Emergency broadcasts streamed across every frequency, in every language from every Council world simultaneously. Chen grabbed the communications panel, filtering through the chaos for something coherent. Her blood went cold as the message resolved. All Council forces to high alert. Extragalactic contact confirmed. Mass readings beyond calculated scale. Pattern matches historical warnings. Code classification, Devourer event. Williams stared at the screen. That's impossible. The Devourers are a myth. a story the elder races tell. But the data didn't lie. Chen pulled up the long-range sensor feeds that were being broadcast openly in the emergency. At the galactic rim, space itself was dying. Stars were going dark. Entire systems were vanishing from sensors. And moving through the darkness was something that made the Council's entire fleet look like toys in a bathtub. The Devourers had arrived. The shuttle docked with the Indomitable, and Chen went straight to the bridge. Her crew was already at stations, every screen showing the same horrifying data. Lieutenant Reeves, her tactical officer, looked up as she entered. "Captain, are we seeing this right? Those mass readings can't be accurate." "They're accurate." Chen dropped into her command chair, fingers already dancing across her personal console. "How long until they reach civilized space?" "At their current speed, 6 months. Maybe less if they accelerate." "Captain, the Council fleets are mobilizing. Every ship, every species. They're forming a defense line at the outer reach." Chen pulled up the formation plans that were being distributed across the fleet network. It was impressive, she had to admit. Thousands of ships, weapons that bent physics itself, coordinated by the most advanced tactical computers in the galaxy. On paper, it looked unbeatable. She'd been a soldier long enough to know that the enemy hadn't read the paper. "Orders from Earth Command," her communications officer called out. "All human vessels are to take up observation positions at the rear of the formation. We are not to engage unless directly threatened. We are to record everything and transmit continuously back to Earth." "They're benching us," Reeves said, not bothering to hide his anger. "No," Chen corrected. "They're making sure someone survives to tell the story." She looked at her crew, seeing the frustration on every face. "The Council thinks we're primitive. Maybe they're right. But primitive species have survived a long time by knowing when to watch and learn." Over the next 3 months, Chen watched the Council prepare for war with an efficiency that was genuinely impressive. Shipyards across civilized space worked around the clock. New weapons were developed, each one more exotic than the last. Quantum disruptors that could unmake matter at the subatomic level. Singularity projectors that created miniature black holes. Probability manipulators that could, theoretically, erase an enemy ship from existence by calculating all possible timelines and eliminating the ones where the ship survived. The human fleet, all 37 vessels, hung at the edge of the formation and watched. They ran their drills. They maintained their weapons. They waited. Chen spent hours reviewing the limited data available on the Devourers. Most of it was legend, stories from races that claimed to have survived previous invasions millions of years ago. The consistent details were terrifying. The Devourers consumed everything. They learned from every encounter. They adapted to every weapon. 12 galaxies had fallen to them before they turned their attention here. "Captain," her science officer, Dr. Okafor, said during one of these review sessions, "I've been analyzing the historical data. There's a pattern. Go on. Every species that reported fighting the Devourers used advanced technology, energy weapons, exotic physics, biological manipulation, and the Devourers adapted to all of it within hours or days. But there's no record of anyone using what the Council calls primitive technology against them." Chen looked up from her screen. Because any species still using primitive technology wouldn't have survived long enough to leave records. Maybe. Or maybe the Devourers never encountered it. They've consumed 12 galaxies, but those were all galaxies full of advanced civilizations. What if their adaptation protocols are specifically designed for advanced physics? What if they've never seen a simple kinetic weapon? It was an interesting thought. Chen filed it away but didn't give it much weight. Against billions of ships, humanity's 37 vessels wouldn't make a difference regardless of what weapons they carried. The Devourers arrived at the outer reach 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Chen watched the long-range sensors with growing horror as the true scale of the enemy became clear. Not millions of ships. Billions. They moved like a living thing, like a school of fish or a flock of birds, each vessel connected to every other in ways that made no sense to human understanding. The Council fleet opened fire at maximum range. The display was beautiful and terrible. Quantum disruptors tore holes in reality itself. Singularity weapons created cascading event horizons that consumed thousands of Devourer ships at once. Probability manipulators sparked and flickered across vast sections of the enemy fleet, and whole swaths simply ceased to exist. For the first hour, it looked like the Council might actually win. The Devourers' numbers were dropping rapidly. Reports flooded the communications networks. triumphant and relieved. Then the Devourers adapted. Chen watched it happen in real time. The quantum disruptors started missing, their targeting solutions suddenly incorrect. The singularity weapons collapsed prematurely, their event horizons destabilizing. The probability manipulators fired, but nothing happened, as if the Devourers had learned to exist in all timelines simultaneously. Within 3 hours of first contact, every advanced weapon in the Council arsenal had become useless. The slaughter began. Zexari crystal ships, each one a work of art and science, shattered under weapons that seemed to be made of the same adaptive biology as the Devourers themselves. Mothkin energy beings were dispersed, their containment fields breached by attacks that shouldn't have been possible. Karathi bioships, enhanced and perfected over thousands of years, were consumed and repurposed, turning against their creators within minutes of capture. The human fleet hung back and recorded everything. Chen made herself watch even though every instinct screamed at her to help, to do something, to die trying rather than just observing. "Captain," Reeves said quietly, "they're dying. All of them. I know. We should help. Our orders—" "Damn the orders!" Reeves slammed his hand on his console. "We're sitting here watching genocide." Chen understood his anger. She felt it too. But she also understood strategy. 37 human ships against billions of Devourers wouldn't change anything, except it would mean no one survived to warn Earth, to prepare, to learn from what they were witnessing. The Council fleet broke after 18 hours of continuous combat. The survivors retreated to the Azure Nebula, a vast cloud of gas and dust that would provide some cover. Out of 5,000 vessels, fewer than 800 remained. A transmission came through on all emergency channels, no encryption, no protocol, just desperation. "Any ships in range? Any forces available? We need help. We need reinforcements, anything, please." Chen closed her eyes. She thought about the Zexari ambassador calling humanity primitive. She thought about the Mothkan suggesting they evolve beyond violence. She thought about the Karathi's look of polite disgust. She thought about 37 ships with railguns and missiles, weapons that were considered obsolete 600 years ago. She opened her eyes and looked at her crew. They looked back at her, waiting. They knew what she was thinking. They knew what it would cost. "Communications, get me Earth Command. Priority Alpha." The response came back within minutes. Admiral Zhao's face appeared on screen, looking old and tired. "Captain Chen, your orders remain unchanged. Observe and record. Admiral, the Council fleet is broken. If we don't intervene, there won't be anyone left to record. 37 ships won't make a difference. Maybe not, but Dr. Okafor had an interesting theory." Chen explained quickly, watching Zhao's expression shift from tired to thoughtful. "It's a long shot. It's the only shot we have, sir." Zhao was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, the decision made. "God go with you, Captain. Make them remember that humanity doesn't abandon its allies, even when those allies thought we weren't good enough to stand beside them." The transmission ended. Chen turned to her helmsman. "Set course for the Azure Nebula. Maximum burn. Signal the rest of the human fleet. Tell them we're going in." "Ma'am," Reeves said, and she heard the pride in his voice. "What do we tell the Council?" Chen smiled without humor. "Tell them the primitives are coming to save them. Tell them to watch and learn how Earth fights." The Indomitable turned toward the battle, her ancient engines burning bright, her obsolete weapons coming online. Behind her, 36 other ships followed, all of them old, all of them dismissed as relics, all of them about to teach the galaxy that sometimes the old ways survived because they worked. The Azure Nebula glowed in the darkness like a dying ember, its clouds of hydrogen and helium lit from within by newborn stars. Under any other circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Now it was just a graveyard waiting to happen. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display update in real time. The Council survivors had formed a defensive sphere deep within the densest part of the nebula, using the gas clouds to mask their sensor signatures. It was a good strategy, the kind that might buy them a few hours. Maybe a day. It wouldn't be enough. The Devourers were already entering the nebula from multiple vectors, their billions of ships moving with the coordination of a single organism. Chen had been watching their patterns for hours now, and the intelligence behind them was terrifying. They weren't just attacking. They were learning, testing, probing for weaknesses with a patience that seemed wrong for something so destructive. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Council command ship," Lieutenant Morrison said from communications. "They're asking us to hold position outside the nebula. They don't want us caught in the crossfire." Chen almost laughed. Even now, facing extinction, the Council was trying to protect the primitive humans. Or maybe they just didn't want the embarrassment of humanity dying alongside them. "Tell them we're coming in anyway. Tell them to mark us as friendlies and try not to shoot us." The Indomitable and her sister ships pushed deeper into the nebula. The gas clouds played hell with sensors, exactly as the Council had intended. But human ships had been designed for worst-case scenarios. Their systems were redundant, backed up, and could function on basic radar if necessary. The Council's more sophisticated ships were having trouble adjusting to the interference. "I'm picking up weapons fire ahead," Reeves called from tactical. "Multiple engagements. The Devourers have found them." Chen pulled up the feed from their forward sensors. Through the swirling clouds of gas, she could see flashes of light. The brief, bright deaths of ships on both sides. The Council was fighting hard, using the nebula's cover to launch ambushes, trying to even the odds through guerrilla tactics. It wasn't working. "Look at that," Dr. Okafor said, pointing to a cluster of data on her screen. "The Devourers are adapting their sensors to penetrate the nebula. They started out blind like everyone else, but watch this progression. 20 minutes ago, their effective sensor range was 10 kilometers. Now it's 40. In another hour, they'll see through the clouds as clearly as open space. They learn that fast? Faster. Captain, I don't think we're dealing with technology in any way we understand it. This is something else. Biology and machine merge so completely that the distinction is meaningless. They encounter a problem, and within minutes, they've evolved a solution." Chen absorbed this information, her mind racing. If the Devourers could adapt to anything given enough time, then the only way to fight them was to not give them time. Hit fast, hit hard, and keep changing tactics before they could adjust. Unfortunately, that was exactly the opposite of how the Council fought wars. She'd reviewed their tactical doctrine during the 3-month buildup. It was all about carefully planned operations, coordinated strikes, and overwhelming force applied precisely. It was elegant. It was sophisticated. It was going to get them all killed. "Captain, the Council flagship is hailing us. Admiral Kethvan of the Karathi fleet. Put him through." The screen flickered and a Karathi appeared. Admiral Kethvan was impressive even by his species standards, easily 3 meters tall, his bioengineered body perfect in proportion and design. His face carried the weight of command, and now, the horror of watching his fleet die. "Captain Chen, I am told you refused our order to remain outside the combat zone." "That's correct, Admiral." "Why? Your ships cannot possibly affect the outcome here. You'll only add to the casualty count." Chen chose her words carefully. "Admiral, how long have you been fighting the Devourers?" 23 hours since first contact." "And in those 23 hours, how many different weapon systems have they adapted to?" Kethvan's expression darkened. "All of them. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy we've deployed has been countered within hours. Some within minutes. We're running out of options, Captain." "That's because they've seen options like yours before. 12 galaxies worth of advanced civilizations, all using variations of the same high-level physics, quantum mechanics, exotic matter, probability manipulation. The Devourers have had millions of years to learn how to counter that kind of warfare. And your point? My point is that they've probably never seen our kind of warfare. Not because it's better, but because it's older, simpler. Any species that was still using kinetic weapons and chemical explosives when the Devourers arrived would have been consumed too quickly to matter." Kethvan was silent for a moment. "You're suggesting your primitive weapons might be effective because the Devourers have no experience with them." "It's a theory. A desperate theory. Do you have a better one?" The Admiral's shoulders sagged slightly. No, I don't." "Very well, Captain Chen, you're welcome to try. Coordinate with my tactical officer. We'll provide targeting data and cover fire. I wish you luck, though I fear you'll need more than that." The transmission ended. Chen turned to her crew. "You all heard that. We've got one shot at this. If we're right, we might actually hurt them. If we're wrong, at least we tried. Reeves, status on all weapon systems. Railguns charged and ready. Missile tubes loaded. We've got 48 nuclear warheads, conventional explosives in tubes 9 through 16, and 6 experimental plasma torpedoes that Command sent along. Forget the plasma torpedoes. If it's more advanced than a firecracker, we're not using it. I want simple, stupid, and brutally kinetic. Aye, Captain. Programming missiles for dumbfire mode. No guidance systems, just point and shoot. Chen pulled up the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was tightening its noose around the Council survivors. Time was running out. All ships, this is Chen. We're going with Operation Sledgehammer. Pick your targets and fire everything. Don't wait for optimal positioning. Don't wait for clear shots. I want maximum violence applied as fast as possible. The longer we give them to adapt, the less chance this works. Acknowledgements came back from the other 36 human vessels. Chen took a deep breath and gave the order she'd been preparing for. All weapons fire! The Indomitable shuddered as her railguns opened up. Depleted uranium slugs, each one weighing half a ton, accelerated to 3% of light speed and punched out into the nebula. There was no exotic physics involved, no quantum uncertainty or probability manipulation, just mass and velocity, converted into kinetic energy by the oldest equation in physics. The missiles followed. Simple, solid-fuel rockets carrying nuclear warheads that humanity had refined over centuries of warfare. They were unguided, using only basic trajectory calculations, but at these ranges that was enough. Chen watched the display, counting seconds. The slugs would arrive first, traveling at relativistic speeds. Then the missiles, slower but carrying death measured in megatons. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The tactical display lit up like a Christmas tree. The railgun slugs hit the Devourer formation, and for the first time since the battle began, the alien ships had no defense. Their adaptive shields, tuned to stop energy weapons and exotic physics, might as well have not existed. The slugs punched through hulls like paper, their kinetic energy converting to heat and shrapnel as they passed through. Each slug killed multiple ships before finally dispersing. Then the nuclear warheads arrived. Chen had never seen a nuclear detonation in space before. The movies always got it wrong, showing fireballs and shockwaves like atmospheric explosions. The reality was different. The warheads vaporized into superheated plasma, expanding in all directions at a significant fraction of light speed. There was no shockwave, but there didn't need to be. The plasma itself was hot enough to melt ship hulls. The radiation pulse fried any electronics not properly shielded. The electromagnetic interference scrambled communications and sensors. And the Devourers, who had spent millions of years learning to counter advanced weapons, had no answer for the universe's most basic form of warfare. Thousands of their ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized in the nuclear fire. Holy hell, Reeves whispered. It worked. It actually worked. The other human ships were firing now, 37 vessels pouring railgun slugs and missiles into the Devourer formation. The aliens' perfect coordination shattered as ships died by the thousands, their hive consciousness unable to process this new threat fast enough. Captain, we're receiving transmissions from the Council fleet, Morrison said, his voice excited. They're saying a lot of things, mostly variations on, what the hell was that? Chen allowed herself a small smile. Tell them that was humanity saying hello. Reeves, reload all tubes. We're not done yet. But even as she gave the order, she could see it on the tactical display. The Devourers were adapting. Their ships were spreading out, making themselves harder to hit with area effect weapons. Their hulls were already changing, growing thicker, adding layers that would ablate under kinetic impact rather than shattering. They're learning, Okafor confirmed. Analyzing the hull composition changes now. They're adding something like Whipple shielding, multiple layers separated by gaps. It's a standard defense against kinetic weapons. They figured it out in less than 10 minutes. How long before they're immune to our weapons? At this rate? Another 20 minutes, maybe 30. Chen's mind raced. 30 minutes. They'd bought 30 minutes of effectiveness. It wasn't enough. The Devourers still numbered in the billions. Even with the Council fleet now joining in, now that they'd seen human weapons work, they'd kill maybe a few million before the adaptation was complete. All ships, continuous fire. Don't let up for a second. Make them adapt to a moving target. The human fleet poured fire into the Devourer formation, railguns overheating and being replaced by backup systems, missile tubes launching until their magazines ran dry. The Council ships joined in where they could, using their tractor beams to throw debris and asteroids at kinetic velocities, improvising the kind of warfare they'd left behind millennia ago. It still wasn't enough. Captain, we're down to 20% ammunition, Reeves reported. And the Devourers are definitely adapting. Our hit ratio is dropping fast. Chen watched the tactical display, seeing the truth in the numbers. They'd hurt the Devourers, maybe even scared them a little. But hurt and scared wasn't enough. The swarm was still closing in. Billions of ships against barely 800 Council vessels and 37 human ships. Admiral Kethvan's face appeared on screen again. Captain Chen, your weapons bought us time, but it's running out. We're planning a final stand, a defensive formation around the nebula's core. We'll take as many of them with us as we can. A suicide stand won't help anyone, Admiral. Do you have an alternative? Chen looked at her crew, seeing the exhaustion and determination on their faces. They'd done the impossible once already. Maybe they could do it again. Yeah, she said slowly, an idea forming. Yeah, I think I do. But it's going to sound insane. Captain, we're about to die fighting an enemy that has consumed 12 galaxies. Insane would be a step up from our current situation. Chen explained her plan. Kethvan listened, his expression shifting from skepticism to horror to something that might have been respect. You're right, he said when she finished. That is insane. It's also the most human thing I've ever heard. Very well, we'll coordinate with you. If we're going to die, we might as well die trying something they'll never see coming. The transmission ended. Chen turned to her helmsman. You heard the plan. Take us in, full speed. And somebody find me every single piece of explosive material left on this ship. We're going to need all of it. The Indomitable turned toward the heart of the Devourer fleet, her engines burning at maximum. Behind her, the rest of the human fleet followed. They were done playing defense. It was time to teach the Devourers what close-quarters combat really meant. And if the galaxy thought humanity's weapons were primitive, they were about to learn that humanity's tactics were downright savage. The distance between the Council's defensive position and the Devourer fleet's leading edge was roughly 800 kilometers. At maximum burn, the Indomitable could cover that distance in just under 4 minutes. Captain Sarah Chen used those 4 minutes to make peace with the decision she'd made. She wasn't leading her crew into battle. She was leading them into something uglier than battle, something that most of the civilized galaxy had forgotten how to do. She was leading them into a brawl. Captain, the Devourers are tracking our approach, Reeves called out. They're moving ships to intercept. Expected. How many? Several thousand. They're forming a wall between us and their main formation. Good, that means they're worried. Morrison, open a channel to the fleet. All ships. The communications officer nodded. Channel open, ma'am. Chen took a breath and spoke, her voice calm despite the situation. All human vessels, this is Chen. In about 3 minutes, we're going to hit their line. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. The Council thinks we're primitive because we never stopped fighting. Because we never evolved past violence. They're about to learn that evolution isn't always progress. Sometimes the old ways survive because they work. Chen out! She closed the channel and pulled up the tactical view. The Devourer ships were arranging themselves in a defensive formation, overlapping fields of fire, mutual support. It was actually quite sophisticated. It was also exactly what she'd hoped they'd do. Reeves, are the Council ships in position? Confirmed. Admiral Kethvan has his entire fleet ready to move on your signal. Then let's do this. All weapons target the center of their formation. I want maximum firepower on the smallest possible point. We're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to punch through. The Indomitable's railguns opened up, joined by every other human ship in the formation. 37 vessels poured fire into a single point in the Devourer line. The alien ships tried to adapt, tried to strengthen their defenses where the fire was concentrated, but that was the trap. They were thinking like defenders, trying to hold a line. Humans had stopped fighting that way around the time they invented the tank. All ships, ramming speed, brace for impact. The helmsman, a young officer named Davis who looked far too calm for what they were about to do, pushed the engines past their rated limits. The Indomitable accelerated, her ancient frame groaning under the stress. The Devourer line had been weakened but not broken by the concentrated fire. That was fine. Chen wasn't planning to go around them. Impact in 10 seconds, Davis called out. Chen gripped the arms of her command chair. All hands brace for collision. The Indomitable hit the Devourer line at several kilometers per second. Her reinforced bow, designed for ramming asteroids out of colonial flight paths, proved equally effective against alien bioships. The impact sent shockwaves through the entire vessel. Alarms blared. Crew members were thrown against their restraints, and they punched through. Behind them, 36 other human vessels followed, each one smashing through the weakened line. They emerged on the other side, battered, bleeding atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches, but intact and inside the Devourer formation. All ships, free engagement, kill anything that moves. Council fleet, execute now. Admiral Keith Vaughn had been skeptical of this plan when Chen first explained it. The idea of deliberately charging into the middle of an enemy formation went against every principle of modern warfare. You used standoff weapons. You maintained safe distances. You did not, under any circumstances, get close enough to the enemy to see the color of their hulls. But Kethvan was also smart enough to recognize that modern warfare had failed. So when Chen gave the signal, he gave his own order, and 800 council ships surged forward. The Devourers had been so focused on the human breakthrough that they didn't see the trap until it was too late. The council fleet hit them from behind, and suddenly the Devourers were caught in a vice, human ships in their midst and council vessels at their backs. Chen watched her tactical display dissolve into chaos. This close, with ships on all sides, the organized battle patterns broke down completely. It became a knife fight in a phone booth, brutal and personal and desperate. Targeting solutions are useless at this range, Reeves reported. Too many friendlies mixed with hostiles. Then stop using targeting solutions. Manual fire. Put our guns on whatever is closest and hostile. Point defense weapons to continuous free fire. If it's not broadcasting a human or council IFF, kill it. The Indomitable became a hurricane of violence. Her railguns fired at targets so close that the slugs punched through multiple ships before dispersing. Her point defense lasers, designed to shoot down missiles and debris, tore through Devourer hulls at ranges measured in meters. Her missile tubes launched warheads that detonated within seconds of leaving the tubes, too close for safety margins but perfect for maximum devastation. A Devourer ship latched onto the Indomitable's port side, its biological weapons trying to tear through the armor. Chen didn't hesitate. Engineering, vent all atmosphere from portside decks 7 through 12. Then open the bulkheads. The engineering officer's face went pale. Captain, we have crew on those decks. They're already in pressure suits or they're dead. Do it. The Indomitable vented atmosphere and the sudden decompression tore the Devourer ship loose, sending it tumbling into another alien vessel. Chen felt sick but pushed the feeling down. This was war at its ugliest. People died. The only question was whether their deaths meant something. Captain, the Devourers are adapting again, Okafor called out. Their ships are growing armor where our weapons hit. They're learning our firing patterns, then change the patterns. All ships switch to rotating fire sequences. Never hit the same spot twice. Keep them guessing. On the main view screen, Chen could see other human vessels employing similar tactics. The TCSV Thermopylae had grappled with a Devourer battleship and was firing her engines directly at the alien hull, using her own drive exhaust as a weapon. The TCSV Alamo had deployed boarding parties, Marines in pressure suits attacking Devourer ships with the most primitive weapons imaginable, cutting torches, explosives, and good old-fashioned firearms. It was messy. It was inefficient. It was completely unlike the elegant warfare the Council preferred. It was working. We're getting casualty reports from the fleet, Morrison said quietly. The Bunker Hill is gone. The Yorktown has lost main power. The Midway is venting atmosphere. Chen closed her eyes briefly. 3 ships. 3 crews. Hundreds of people dead or dying, but the Devourers were dying too, thousands of them. Maybe tens of thousands. The calculus of war was brutal, but it was simple. Kill more of them than they killed of you. A massive explosion lit up the view screen. One of the Council ships, a Zexari cruiser, had rammed a Devourer command ship, its crystalline hull shattering but taking the alien vessel with it. They're learning from us, Reeves said, something like wonder in his voice. The Council is fighting like humans. No, Chen corrected. They're fighting like people who want to live. All that elegance and sophistication was just luxury. Strip it away and every species fights the same way, desperately. The battle raged for hours. There was no organization anymore. No strategy beyond survive and kill. Ships collided, grappled, exploded. The Azure Nebula became a graveyard, filled with debris from 100 different species, all of it mixing together in death. Chen lost track of time. She gave orders. Her crew executed them and the Indomitable kept fighting. Her beautiful ship, 600 years of human engineering, was being torn apart piece by piece, but she was taking Devourers with her. Captain, We've lost the port railgun battery. Starboard missiles are down to 10%. Life support is failing on decks 4 through 8. We're running on emergency power. Status of the fleet? 19 human vessels still operational. Council fleet down to around 400 ships. Devourer losses are significant but difficult to calculate. Millions, maybe. Millions out of billions. It wasn't enough. They were winning the battle, but they were going to lose the war. Admiral Kethavan's face appeared on screen, his perfect features now scarred and bleeding. Captain Chen, my compliments. Your tactics are savage and effective, but we're running out of ships. The Devourers keep sending reinforcements. We can't sustain this. Chen knew he was right. They'd done incredible damage, but the Devourers had numbers that seemed endless. For every ship they destroyed, 2 more appeared. Admiral, how much of your fleet can still move under its own power? Perhaps 300 vessels. Why? Because I have one more trick. It's going to cost us everything, but it might actually work. How many ships are you willing to sacrifice? Kethavan looked at her for a long moment. Tell me your plan, Captain, Chen explained. The Admiral's expression shifted from exhaustion to shock, to something that might have been admiration. That's not a plan, Captain. That's suicide dressed up in tactical language. Yes, but it'll work. The question is whether you're willing to pay the price. Kethavan closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were filled with a determination Chen recognized. It was the look of someone who'd decided that survival wasn't as important as making sure the enemy remembered you. Very well. I'll coordinate with my fleet. We'll give you 30 minutes. Make it count. The transmission ended. Chen turned to her crew. They looked at her, waiting for orders, trusting her to get them through this. She was about to violate that trust. Listen carefully. We're going to make a run at their command ship. The big one coordinating their fleet movements. We're going to get as close as we can, and then we're going to overload every reactor, every power cell, every explosive system on this ship. The Indomitable is going to become the biggest bomb in this nebula. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Reeves cleared his throat. Captain, that's a one-way trip. Yes, which is why I'm giving everyone a choice. Anyone who wants to evacuate to the council ships has 5 minutes to get to the escape pods. No judgment, no shame. You've all done more than anyone could ask. Nobody moved. Captain, Davis said from the helm. Permission to speak freely? Granted. We're not leaving. This is our ship. If she's going down, we're going down with her. That's how Earth does things. Chen felt her throat tighten. You're all insane. Yes, ma'am, Reeves said with a slight smile. But we're human. It's pretty much the same thing. Chen nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She turned to the tactical display and marked their target, the massive Devourer command ship that was coordinating the swarm's movements. All right then. Let's show them why you don't mess with primitives. Helm, take us in. Engineering, start the overload sequence. Set it for 30 minutes. That should give the council fleet time to get clear. The Indomitable turned toward the command ship, her battered engines burning one last time. Around her, the battle continued to rage, but Chen focused on her target. This ship had to die. If it didn't, everything they'd done, everyone who died, would be for nothing. Captain, the Devourers are trying to intercept us, Reeves called. Multiple ships moving to block our approach. All remaining weapons, clear us a path. Council fleet, we're starting our run. Get ready to pull back. The Indomitable accelerated, her crew working together with the efficiency of long practice. They'd served together for years, fighting pirates, settling colonial disputes, exploring strange new worlds. This was supposed to be their last tour before retirement. Well, Chen thought darkly, they'd definitely retire after this. The Devourer command ship grew larger on the view screen, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the largest council dreadnoughts. It pulsed with bioluminescence, organic and technological, merged into something that shouldn't exist. 20 minutes until detonation, engineering called out. Increase speed. Get us there in 15. The ship groaned, but held together. Just a little longer. Just a little more. And then, breaking through the Devourer formation, the Indomitable reached her target, her dying breath ready to become a roar that would shake the galaxy. The Devourer command ship filled the entire forward view screen of the Indomitable, a mountain of biomechanical horror that pulsed with its own alien life. Captain Sarah Chen could see smaller ships moving across its surface like antibodies, trying to intercept her dying vessel before it could complete its final mission. 10 minutes to detonation, the engineering officer called out. his voice remarkably steady for someone who'd just accepted his own death. "Evasive pattern Delta 7, Chen ordered. "Don't let them stop us now." The Indomitable weaved through enemy fire, her point defense systems shooting down incoming projectiles even as sections of her hull peeled away under the assault. She was falling apart, but she was still moving forward, still closing the distance. 5 kilometers. 4. 3. "Captain, multiple Devourer ships have attached to our hull," Reeves reported. "They're trying to board us. Seal all bulkheads. Vent atmosphere in any section they breach. They want to board us? Let them ride this bomb all the way in." The ship shuddered as Devourer organisms tore into her hull. Chen could hear the sounds of combat over the internal communications. Marines fighting a desperate rearguard action against creatures that had conquered 12 galaxies. The sounds cut off one by one as sections were sealed or destroyed. 2 kilometers. 1. "Captain, we're in optimum detonation range," Okafor said. "The blast radius will definitely take out the command ship." "Good. Engineering, how long until—" The ship lurched violently. Alarm screamed across every console. Chen gripped her command chair as the entire vessel tilted at an impossible angle. "Report. They've latched onto us with some kind of tractor beam. They're pulling us away from the command ship." Chen's mind raced. They'd come so far, sacrificed so much. She wouldn't let it end like this. All remaining power to engines. Fight them. "Captain, if we push the engines any harder with the reactors already in overload, we'll detonate early. Then we better make sure we're close enough when we do. Full power, now!" The engines screamed. The Indomitable fought against the force pulling her back, her ancient frame groaning under stresses it was never designed to handle. For a moment they hung there, locked in a tug-of-war with an enemy that had consumed galaxies. Then something in the engine room exploded. The ship surged forward, her engines dying but her momentum carrying her toward the command ship. Chen watched the distance close, counting down in her head. "Abandon ship," she ordered. "Everyone to the escape pods, that's an order." "Captain," Reeves began. "Go. Somebody has to tell Earth what happened here. Go." Her crew hesitated only a moment, then moved with trained efficiency. Chen stayed in her command chair, watching the tactical display. The escape pods launched, small sparks of hope fleeing from a dying ship. The Council fleet was pulling back, creating distance from the imminent detonation. She was alone now. Just her and the Indomitable falling together toward the enemy. The command ship tried to evade, but something that massive couldn't move quickly. Chen allowed herself a grim smile. They'd built the Indomitable to last, to take punishment and keep fighting. Now she was going to fulfill that purpose one final time. The distance closed to 0. The reactors went critical, and the Azure Nebula lit up with a light that would be visible across half the galaxy. The explosion consumed the Indomitable and the Devourer command ship, a sphere of annihilation that expanded at the speed of light. The command ship, for all its size and organic technology, couldn't withstand temperatures that rivaled the core of a star. It vaporized, along with the thousands of smaller Devourer vessels that had been too close to escape. The detonation triggered a chain reaction. The command ship's own power systems failed catastrophically, adding their energy to the blast. The shockwave expanded, carrying superheated plasma and radiation through the Devourer formation. From the safety of the retreat position, Admiral Kethvan watched as 15,000 enemy vessels simply ceased to exist. But more than that, something changed in how the Devourer fleet moved. The perfect coordination faltered. Ships collided with each other. Attack patterns became confused. Their hive consciousness, one of his officers said, understanding dawning. The command ship was the central node. Without it, they're lost. Kethvan opened a channel to all remaining vessels. All ships press the attack. They're vulnerable. Don't let them recover. The Council fleet, reduced to less than 400 vessels, threw itself back into the fight. But this time it was different. The Devourers weren't adapting anymore. They were just fighting. Ships operating independently, their collective intelligence shattered. The human fleet, down to 15 operational vessels, led the charge. They'd learned from watching the Indomitable's sacrifice. If taking out command ships worked that well, they'd take out everyone they could find. The battle raged for another 12 hours. The Devourers, deprived of their coordination, fought like animals rather than the intelligent collective they'd been. They were still dangerous, still deadly, but they could be beaten. When it was over, The Azure Nebula was quiet, except for the occasional explosion from a damaged ship or the hiss of venting atmosphere. The Devourer fleet had retreated, what was left of it, back beyond the galactic rim. They'd lost millions of ships. More importantly, they'd lost their invincibility. Admiral Kethvan stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the casualty reports. The Council had lost 85% of its fleet. The human contingent had lost 22 of 37 ships. The total death toll was in the millions, but they'd won. A transmission came through from Earth Command. Admiral Zhao's face appeared on screen, older and more tired than Kethvan remembered from their brief meeting months ago. Admiral Kethvan. I've received your preliminary report. I wanted to personally thank you for working with our fleet. Captain Chen was one of our best. Admiral Zhao, I owe you more than thanks. I owe you an apology. We called your people primitive. We dismissed your technology as obsolete. Captain Chen and her crew proved us wrong in the most definitive way possible. Zhao's expression was unreadable. Did we prove you wrong? Or did we prove that sometimes being primitive is exactly what's needed? Your weapons were sophisticated enough that the Devourers could understand and counter them. Ours were so simple that they had no frame of reference. Perhaps. But it wasn't just your weapons that saved us. It was your tactics. Your willingness to close with the enemy. To accept casualties, to make the hard choices that we'd evolved beyond. We'd become so civilized that we'd forgotten how to be savage when savagery was required. The conversation continued for another hour, discussing strategy, coordinating recovery efforts, and planning for the possibility that the Devourers might return. When it ended, Kethvan had a new appreciation for humanity. They weren't primitive. They were practiced. 6 months passed. The galaxy worked to rebuild. The Council had lost much, but they'd survived, and survival meant hope. Humanity's role in the battle couldn't be hidden or downplayed. Every species knew that the primitive humans had saved them all. The vote for humanity's admission to the Galactic Council was unanimous. Chen's daughter, Commander Elizabeth Chen, stood in the council chambers wearing her dress uniform. She'd been promoted to captain and given command of humanity's newest warship after her mother's sacrifice. The council representatives who'd mocked humanity before now stood to honor them. The Zixari ambassador, Harmonious Calculation of the 7th Degree, approached her after the ceremony. His crystalline form seemed somehow subdued. Captain Chen, I wish to apologize for my species' treatment of yours during your first petition. We were arrogant. We believed our advancement made us superior. Your mother taught us otherwise. Elizabeth kept her expression neutral. My mother taught you that advancement isn't always progress. Sometimes the old ways survive because they work. Indeed, and now we must learn to balance our sophistication with your pragmatism. The Council has requested that human military advisors be assigned to all fleet commands. Your tactics, your weapons doctrine, your willingness to engage at close quarters, these are skills we've lost and must relearn. You want us to teach you how to be primitive? The Zexari actually seemed to wince. Please do not use that word. What we called primitive, we now understand to be fundamental. The Devourers taught us that our advanced weapons could be countered. You taught us that the most basic principles of warfare, mass, velocity, and violence, can never be fully evolved beyond. Elizabeth considered this. Very well. But understand that if you want to fight like humans, you need to think like humans. That means accepting casualties. That means making choices that will haunt you. That means being willing to sacrifice everything to protect what matters. Can the Council do that? We must learn. The Devourers are gone, but they may return, and there may be other threats we haven't imagined. We can no longer afford to be complacent in our advancement. The conversation ended, and Elizabeth left the council chambers. Outside, her crew was waiting, standing at attention beside the shuttle that would take them back to their new ship. Earth had built the TCSV Sarah Chen as a hybrid vessel, combining council energy shields and sensor technology with human weapons and armor. She was fast, tough, and carried enough firepower to level a small moon. But more than that, she carried the legacy of her namesake, a reminder that humanity hadn't stopped being dangerous just because they'd reached the stars. Captain, her executive officer said as they boarded the shuttle, the crew wants to know if the rumors are true. Are we really going to be training council forces? That's correct, Commander. We're heading to the Karathi Military Academy next week. They want to learn human small unit tactics and close quarters combat. They want to learn how to board enemy ships, among other things. They want to learn how humanity fights wars. Not the clean, civilized version. The real thing. The shuttle lifted off, carrying them toward orbit where the Sarah Chen waited. Elizabeth looked out at the planet below, at the council chambers where humanity had finally been accepted as equals. But she wasn't thinking about acceptance. She was thinking about her mother's final transmission, recorded in the Indomitable's black box and recovered from the debris field. Sarah Chen's last words had been simple. Tell Earth we made them remember. Tell Earth that being primitive isn't an insult. It's a warning. Elizabeth intended to make sure the galaxy never forgot that warning. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not by being sophisticated, but by being effective. Not by being advanced, but by being dangerous. The shuttle docked with the Sarah Chen, and Elizabeth took her place on the bridge. The ship was ready. The crew was ready. And somewhere out there, beyond the galactic rim, the Devourers were licking their wounds and learning that humans were the most dangerous kind of primitive. The kind that survived by being too stubborn to die and too violent to ignore. Helm, Elizabeth said, settling into the command chair that felt too much like her mother's. Take us out. Set course for Karathi space. We have a galaxy to train, and I want them to understand what they're getting into. Aye, Captain, the helmsman replied. Course laid in. Ready to proceed? Then let's proceed. And someone find me the weapons officer. We need to discuss the new railgun configuration. I want to make sure when we teach the Council how to fight, we teach them properly. The Sarah Chen turned away from Axios Prime, her engines burning bright, her weapons ready. She was humanity's promise to the galaxy, a promise of protection, of strength, and of the savage efficiency that had saved them all. Because in the end, the Council had learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach. Civilization was worth fighting for, but you had to remember how to fight dirty to keep it. The Karathi Military Academy had trained warriors for 3,000 years. Its halls were monuments to sophisticated warfare, filled with holographic displays showing perfectly executed maneuvers, elegant solutions to tactical problems, and the evolution of combat from simple violence to an art form that balanced efficiency with minimal casualties. Captain Elizabeth Chen walked through those halls with her hands clasped behind her back, studying the displays with professional interest. Behind her, a group of 24 Karathi officer candidates followed, their perfect bioengineered bodies moving with unconscious grace. They were the best their species had to offer, selected for intelligence, physical capability, and tactical aptitude. They were about to get an education their ancestors had deliberately forgotten. Captain Chen, one of the instructors said, a senior officer named Velthar, who wore enough decorations to armor a small ship. We're honored to have you here. Your reputation precedes you. My mother's reputation, you mean. You served under her command for 8 years. You were with the fleet during the Battle of Azure Nebula. Though not aboard the Indomitable, you've seen humanity's way of war firsthand. That's why we asked for you specifically. Elizabeth turned to face the assembled candidates. They stood at perfect attention, eyes forward, breathing synchronized. Everything about them screamed discipline and order. That was going to have to change. Tell me something, she said, addressing the candidates directly. What do you think war is? A candidate in the front row, a female with the rank insignia of a lieutenant, spoke up. War is organized violence between political entities, conducted with the goal of achieving strategic objectives while minimizing casualties and collateral damage. That's what war should be in an ideal universe, Elizabeth corrected. But we don't live in an ideal universe. War is what happens when two groups decide that killing each other is preferable to compromise. Everything else, strategy, tactics, honor, rules of engagement, those are just lies we tell ourselves to feel better about murder. The candidates looked uncomfortable. Velthar cleared his throat. Captain, perhaps we should begin with something less philosophical. We've prepared simulation chambers where you can demonstrate human tactical doctrine. Elizabeth smiled without humor. Simulation chambers. Of course you have. That's part of the problem. You've been fighting simulated wars for so long that you've forgotten what real combat feels like. But fine, let's start there. Maybe I can break your simulations enough to make a point. The simulation chamber was impressive. A massive holographic environment that could recreate any battlefield conditions with perfect accuracy. The candidates filed in, taking positions at their assigned stations. Elizabeth stood in the center, studying the controls. "What scenario would you like to demonstrate?" Felthar asked. "Show me your standard fleet engagement simulation. The one you used to train captains, the chamber activated. Ships appeared in formation, both friendly and enemy forces arranged in textbook positions. The enemy was labeled as a generic hostile fleet, roughly equal in numbers and capability to the defending force. Your task," Belthar explained, "is to defeat the enemy fleet while minimizing casualties on both sides. The simulation grades performance based on efficiency, elegance of solution, and preservation of resources." Elizabeth studied the setup for about 30 seconds. Then she started giving orders. "All ships, full power to engines, close to knife fighting range. Forget about formation integrity. I want every ship picking its own target and engaging at point-blank range. Use everything, ramming speed if you have to. The goal isn't to minimize casualties. It's to win." The candidates looked at each other in confusion. This wasn't how the simulation was supposed to be run. But they followed orders, and the holographic fleet charged forward in a chaotic mass. The simulation's AI, designed to respond to conventional tactics, didn't know what to do with this approach. It tried to maintain standoff distance, tried to preserve formation integrity, tried to follow its programming for optimal combat. Elizabeth's fleet ignored all of that and simply crashed into them like a tidal wave. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. Elizabeth's fleet won with brutal efficiency, though her casualty rates were 3 times higher than the simulation's acceptable parameters. "Simulation complete," the computer announced. "Performance grade unacceptable. Casualty rates exceed acceptable losses by 297%. Tactical approach rated as crude and inefficient. Recommend remedial training in fleet coordination and—" "Computer, shut up," Elizabeth interrupted. She turned to the candidates. "What did you just see?" The lieutenant who'd spoken earlier raised her hand hesitantly. "We saw an approach that violated every principle of modern warfare. Your casualty rates were appalling, but I won. The enemy fleet was destroyed. That's the point of combat, isn't it? To destroy the enemy's ability to fight. But the cost was acceptable because we achieved the objective. Your simulation is programmed to fight a certain way, to value elegance over effectiveness. But the Devourers didn't care about elegance. They cared about winning. And when you fought them with your sophisticated tactics, they adapted and destroyed you. When humans fought them with our crude tactics, they didn't know how to respond." Felthar stepped forward. "Captain, I understand your point, but surely there's value in minimizing casualties. Every life lost is a tragedy. Every life lost fighting to protect others is a tragedy," Elizabeth agreed. "Every life lost because you were too concerned with elegance to win is a waste. There's a difference." She pulled up another simulation, this one showing a boarding action. "Show me how your people handle ship-to-ship combat at close quarters." The simulation ran. Karathi Marines used sophisticated tactics, coordinated fire teams, suppression fields, non-lethal weapons designed to disable rather than kill. It was impressive and efficient. It was also completely wrong for fighting the Devourers. "Computer, replace the enemy forces with Devourer biosoldiers. Use data from the Azure Nebula engagement." The simulation reset. This time, when the Karathi Marines entered the enemy ship using their sophisticated tactics, they lasted about 40 seconds before being overwhelmed. The Devourers adapted to their weapons, ignored their suppression fields, and tore them apart. Now show them how human Marines handled the same situation. The simulation shifted to data from the TCSV Thermopylae's boarding action. Human Marines entered the Devourer ship with a completely different approach. They used high explosives to breach the hull, flooded sections with fire from flamethrowers, employed close-range weapons like shotguns and submachine guns. When Devourers tried to adapt, the humans switched weapons. When sophisticated weapons failed, they used knives. When knives weren't enough, they used their bare hands. It was savage, brutal, and completely unlike the Karathi approach. The humans took heavy casualties, but they won. The simulation ended in silence. Elizabeth looked at the candidates and saw something new in their expressions. Not just discomfort now. Understanding maybe, or horror, possibly both. "The difference," she said quietly, "is that we're willing to get dirty. We're willing to take losses. We're willing to do whatever it takes to win because we understand that losing means extinction. Your people haven't had to face that reality in millennia. You've forgotten what desperation looks like. Over the next 6 weeks, Elizabeth put the candidates through a crash course in human military doctrine. She taught them about acceptable losses and calculated risks. She showed them boarding tactics that made Velthar physically ill. She explained the concept of ramming attacks, self-destruct sequences, and rearguard actions where the defenders knew they wouldn't survive but fought anyway to buy time for others. She taught them that war wasn't elegant. It was ugly, brutal, and personal. Not all of the candidates made it through the program. Some washed out, unable to accept the level of violence Elizabeth was teaching. Others had psychological breaks when they realized what humanity had been doing to itself for thousands of years before reaching the stars. But the ones who made it through were different, harder. They'd learned to think like humans, to fight like humans, to accept that sometimes the only way to protect civilization was to be willing to become savage. 3 months into her assignment at the academy, Elizabeth received an emergency transmission. Admiral Kethvan's face appeared on screen, and she could see the tension in his expression. Captain Chen, the Devourers have returned. They've breached the galactic rim at a different point, avoiding our defense positions. We're assembling a response fleet, but we need experienced commanders. We need you. Elizabeth felt her pulse quicken. How long do we have? They'll reach the outer colonies in 2 weeks. We're hoping to intercept them before that. I'll leave immediately. What about the training program? Bring your best students. This will be their final exam. Elizabeth turned to find Velthar standing in the doorway, having obviously overheard. The old instructor looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Take them, he said.
Take the ones who've learned your lessons.
Show us if human doctrine really works against a prepared enemy. The Devourers don't prepare. They adapt. But I'll show you that adaptation has limits. The TCSV Sarah Chen departed the Karathi homeworld with 15 additional passengers, officer candidates who'd volunteered to put their new training into practice. Elizabeth stood on the bridge as they accelerated toward the interception point, reviewing tactical data. The Devourers had learned from their first defeat. Their fleet was smaller but more focused, targeting specific systems rather than trying to swarm everywhere at once. They'd also adapted their tactics, showing more caution, maintaining defensive formations they'd learned. That was good. It meant they were thinking like an intelligent enemy, rather than an unstoppable force of nature. It also meant they could be outthought. The combined fleet assembled at the interception point 2 days later. 200 council vessels, the largest fleet they could muster on short notice, arranged in formation. Elizabeth noted with approval that the formation was less rigid than before, allowing for more independent action. Admiral Kethvan's flagship took position in the center. His face appeared on every ship's main screen. All commanders, this is Admiral Kethvan. We faced the Devourers again, but this time we're ready. This time we fight with the tactics that defeated them before. We will not stand off. We will close to melee range. We will fight with every weapon, every strategy, every dirty trick we can devise. The Devourers learned from their defeat. So have we. All ships prepare for close engagement. May we all survive what comes next. The transmission ended. Elizabeth turned to her crew, seeing the mixture of fear and determination on their faces. The Karathi candidates were at various stations, integrated into the ship's operations. They'd learned well, but theory was about to become brutal practice. Helm, take us to the front of the formation. If we're going to teach the council how to fight, we're going to lead by example. The Sarah Chen moved forward, her weapons coming online. Behind her, the council fleet followed, ready to prove they'd learned humanity's lessons. The Devourers appeared on long-range sensors, their fleet significantly smaller than before but still numbering in the hundreds of thousands. They'd adapted their approach, moving more cautiously, maintaining defensive formations that would have been sensible against conventional tactics. But humans didn't use conventional tactics. All ships, this is Chen. We're not waiting for them to come to us. We're going to hit them first, hit them hard, and keep hitting them until they break. Remember your training. Fight ugly. Fight mean. Make them remember why they ran the first time. The fleet accelerated to attack speed. Elizabeth watched the tactical display, seeing the Devourers react to their approach. The alien ships were forming up to receive the charge, overlapping fields of fire, mutual support. Standard defensive tactics. Predictable. Exploitable. Tactical. Target their strongest concentration. I want them to think we're committing to a frontal assault. Aye, Captain. Targeting solutions locked. The fleet bore down on the Devourer formation, weapons coming to bear. The aliens opened fire at maximum range, learning from the last battle to engage early and often. Energy weapons and bioprojectiles filled the space between the fleets. The Council ships took damage but kept coming, their new hybrid shields combining advanced energy fields with simple physical armor. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Range to target, 3,000 kilometers, Tactical called out. All ships execute scatter maneuver on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. The fleet split apart at the last second, ships peeling off in multiple directions instead of continuing the frontal assault. The Devourers had concentrated their fire on what they thought would be the main strike. When it dispersed, their defensive formation had gaps. Now we exploit them. All ships target the gaps. Get in close and make them regret adapting. The Sarah Chen led the charge through a gap in the Devourer formation, her railguns firing at targets so close they couldn't miss. Behind her, Council ships followed, using ramming tactics, point-blank weapons fire, and boarding actions to tear through the enemy fleet. The Devourers tried to adapt, tried to close the gaps, but the attack was too fast and too chaotic. This wasn't the organized swarm they'd been before. This was a brawl, and brawls were humanity's specialty. One of the Karathi candidates stationed at the weapons console called out excitedly, "Captain, their adaptation protocols are failing. They're trying to counter multiple tactics simultaneously and can't keep up. That's because we're not giving them time to adapt. Keep cycling through weapon systems. Never use the same approach twice in a row." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Devourers fought desperately, but they were learning a hard lesson. Adaptation requires time. Analysis requires patterns. The human way of war provided neither. When it was over, the Devourer fleet had been destroyed, not scattered, not driven off. Destroyed completely. The Council fleet had taken casualties, but nowhere near the losses from the first battle. They'd learned. They'd adapted. They'd become dangerous. Admiral Kethavan's face appeared on screen, and for the first time since Elizabeth had met him, he was smiling. "Captain Chen, congratulations, your tactics were perfectly executed." The Devourers never knew what hit them. They knew, Admiral. That's the point. We hit them with everything all at once from every direction. They couldn't adapt fast enough because we didn't give them a chance to breathe. Indeed. I'm recommending that all Council fleet commanders undergo the training program at the Academy. We need more officers who think like you do. Careful what you wish for. If the whole galaxy starts thinking like humans, it's going to be a much more violent place. Perhaps, but it will also be a place that survives. I'll take violence over extinction. The conversation ended. Elizabeth looked at her Karathi students, seeing them process what they'd just experienced. Real combat, real death, real victory earned through brutal efficiency. "What you just saw," she told them, "is what your ancestors gave up when they decided to become civilized. They thought they were evolving beyond violence. But violence doesn't care about your evolution. It just is. The question isn't whether you use violence. It's whether you use it effectively." The lieutenant who'd questioned her on the first day spoke up. "Captain, I understand now. Humans aren't primitive. You're experienced. You've been doing this longer than any of us." "No," Elizabeth corrected. "We're both. We're primitive because we never stopped perfecting the basics. We're experienced because we never stopped fighting. The two go together. That's why we survived when more advanced species didn't." Over the following year, the Karathi Academy's curriculum changed dramatically. Human instructors were stationed at military schools across Council space. The elegant tactics of the past were preserved as historical curiosities. But the focus shifted to practical warfare, the kind that prioritized survival over sophistication. The galaxy didn't become more peaceful. If anything, minor conflicts became more frequent as species tested their new doctrines against each other. But major threats like the Devourers were met with overwhelming force, delivered with brutal efficiency. The Council had learned to fight like humans, and that made them dangerous in ways they'd never been before. Elizabeth commanded the Sarah Chen for another 5 years before being promoted to admiral and given command of the Joint Defense Fleet, a mixed force of human and Council vessels tasked with patrolling the galactic rim. She'd proven that human tactics worked not just once but consistently against any threat that emerged. But she never forgot her mother's sacrifice. Every time she sat in a command chair, She thought about the Indomitable and its final charge. About the price of teaching the galaxy that primitive didn't mean weak. 10 years after the Battle of Azure Nebula, a memorial was erected at the site of the old battlefield. The nebula had cleared somewhat, its gases dispersed by the energy of countless explosions. In the center, floating in the void, was a simple monument made of steel recovered from the Indomitable's wreckage. The inscription was simple. They called us primitive. We showed them why that was a warning, not an insult. Elizabeth Chen stood before the memorial during the dedication ceremony, flanked by Admiral Kethvan and representatives from every council species. The survivors of the battle were there too, their numbers fewer each year, their faces marked by the memories of what they'd endured. "My mother used to tell me something when I was young," Elizabeth said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd through speakers and translators. She said that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our technology or our intelligence. It was our stubbornness, our refusal to quit even when quitting made sense, our willingness to pay any price to protect what we loved. She paused, looking at the twisted metal of the memorial. Somewhere in that wreckage was the command chair her mother had died in, fused with the deck plates by heat that rivaled a star's core. The Indomitable was 600 years old when she made her final voyage. By galactic standards, she was obsolete before she was launched. But she did something that the most advanced ships in the galaxy couldn't do. She scared an enemy that had conquered 12 galaxies. She made them bleed. She made them remember. Admiral Kethvan stepped forward, his bioengineered body showing signs of age that his species usually eliminated. He'd chosen to keep the scars from the battle, a reminder that perfection sometimes meant weakness. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I want to say something that should have been said much earlier. We were wrong. We called humanity primitive as if it were an insult. We didn't understand that you were showing us a mirror, reflecting back what we had lost in our pursuit of sophistication. Captain Sarah Chen and her crew didn't just save us. They taught us how to save ourselves. The ceremony continued with speeches and remembrances. But Elizabeth's mind was elsewhere, thinking about the legacy her mother had left. The galaxy had changed in 10 years. It was harder now, meaner, more willing to fight for what it believed in. Some mourned the loss of elegance in warfare. Others celebrated the newfound strength. Elizabeth just hoped they remembered the lesson. Violence wasn't the answer to every problem. But when violence was necessary, you didn't fight with one hand tied behind your back. You fought to win, using every weapon and tactic available because the alternative was extinction. After the ceremony, she returned to her flagship, a massive vessel that combined the best of human and council technology. The fleet under her command numbered over 1,000 ships, a force that could respond to any threat in the galaxy within days. Her chief of staff, a Zexari named Resonant Clarity, approached with a datapad. The crystalline being had learned to move and speak in ways humans found comfortable, adapting his communication style the way his people adapted everything else. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim. Long-range sensors have detected anomalous readings beyond the galactic barrier. It could be nothing, but after the Devourers, we don't assume anything is nothing," Elizabeth finished. "Show me." The data displayed on her personal screen. Energy signatures that didn't match any known natural phenomenon. Movement patterns that suggested intelligence. And a scale that made her blood run cold. "How many?" she asked quietly. "If the readings are accurate, we're looking at a force at least twice the size of the original Devourer invasion. They're holding position beyond the barrier as if they're observing us." Elizabeth studied the data, her mind working through tactical possibilities. If this was another invasion, the galaxy was more prepared than it had been 10 years ago. But prepared and capable of winning were two different things. Assemble the fleet commanders for a briefing. I want every ship on high alert, and get me a channel to Earth Command. They need to know about this. As Resonant Clarity moved to carry out her orders, Elizabeth looked out at the stars through the bridge viewports. Somewhere out there, a new threat was gathering. The galaxy had learned to fight like humans, to be savage when necessary, to pay the price that survival demanded. Now they were going to find out if the lessons had taken root deeply enough, if the civilized species of the galaxy could truly embrace the primitive, when civilization itself was at stake. She thought about her mother's final words recorded in the Indomitable's black box. "Tell Earth we made them remember." Elizabeth smiled grimly. The galaxy had remembered. The question now was whether they'd remembered well enough. All stations, battle stations, she ordered. This is not a drill. Unknown contact beyond the galactic rim. We're going to meet them at the barrier and show them what happens when you threaten a galaxy that learned to fight dirty. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency, humans and aliens working side by side. They'd trained together, fought together, and learned that survival wasn't about being the most advanced or the most elegant. It was about being the most determined. The fleet began to move, 1,000 ships carrying the combined knowledge of 100 species. They had energy weapons and kinetic weapons, quantum shields and physical armor, sophisticated tactics and the willingness to get close enough to use their teeth if necessary. They were no longer a collection of separate species. They were a unified force that had learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach. When someone threatens your home, you don't ask questions. You don't negotiate. You don't try to be civilized about it. You fight with everything you have, and you don't stop until the threat is eliminated or you are. As the fleet accelerated toward the unknown threat, Elizabeth settled into her command chair. It felt different from her mother's chair on the Indomitable, more advanced, more comfortable. But the weight of command was the same. The responsibility for the lives under her command. The burden of making decisions that would determine whether civilizations lived or died. She pulled up the tactical display, studying the force they were about to face. Whatever was out there had made a mistake. They'd given the galaxy 10 years to prepare, 10 years to learn, 10 years to transform from a collection of sophisticated civilizations into something harder, something meaner, something that knew how to survive. Helm increased to maximum speed. Let's not keep our guests waiting. Communications, send a message on all frequencies. Tell them this galaxy is under protection of the Joint Defense Fleet. Tell them we're willing to talk, but we're prepared to fight. And make sure they understand that if they choose to fight, they're not facing the species that were here 10 years ago. What should we tell them we are now, Admiral? The communications officer asked. Elizabeth thought about that question. What were they now? Not human and alien, not primitive and advanced. They were something new, something that had been forged in the fires of the Devourer War and tempered by a decade of hard lessons. Tell them we're survivors, she said finally. Tell them we've learned that being primitive isn't a weakness. It's a warning, and if they're smart, they'll heed it. The message was sent. The fleet continued its journey toward the galactic rim. And in the heart of human space on Earth, in the archives that preserved humanity's history, a new chapter was being written. A chapter about the day the galaxy stopped apologizing for being willing to fight and started being proud of the strength that came from never forgetting how. The Indomitable was gone, but her legacy lived on in every ship that charged into battle with weapons the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. In every soldier who understood that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. In every commander who knew that sophistication was a luxury, but survival was a necessity. Captain Sarah Chen had shown the galaxy how to fight. Her daughter would show them how to never stop fighting, how to never lose the edge that had saved them all, because in the end that was the real lesson. Not that primitive weapons were better, not that violence solved all problems, but that a civilization unwilling to fight with everything it had, including the savage brutality of its ancestors, was a civilization destined to fall, and this galaxy would not fall. Not while humans remembered where they came from. Not while the Council remembered what they'd learned. Not while anyone lived who'd witnessed the Indomitable's final charge and understood what it meant. They would fight. They would survive. And anyone who threatened them would learn the same lesson the Devourers had learned. That the most dangerous enemy wasn't the most advanced. It was the one that refused to die, refused to quit, and refused to fight fair when unfair meant victory. It was the primitive one,